There's ongoing debates about whether or not we're in a good period for gaming right now, and personally, I'm of the opinion that I think on average, gaming is better than it's ever been, because on one hand, we have access to all of gaming history up until now, whether legally or, otherwise. And on the other hand, we have more gaming variety than ever, thanks to indie gaming and to a certain extent modern AAA gaming, especially when compared to the era where everything was, for example, Uncharted or Call of Duty. But there are people out there who do believe that gaming is worse off now than it's ever been, and everyone has their own personal reasons for this. I won't go into that, but there are definitely issues with the modern industry, and one issue in particular that does not get talked up enough is something that is downright destructive to the history of gaming and could get a whole lot worse in the future. Simply put, games dying. I do not use the term "the thing that's killing gaming" idly. This is as literal as it gets, and is something that can and will affect every single one of us. If not now, then soon. Let me tell you a story. Sometime in 2022, I saw that the Ubisoft game The Crew was on sale on PlayStation 4 for $350. I picked it up because, I heard mixed things about the game, but one of the things I heard that interested me was the idea that you can drive all over a truncated version of the continental United States. Sounds like something that would be fun to chill out with. I only played it for a few hours, then eventually put it down, with the understanding that I would eventually get around to it again. However, just out of curiosity, I tried to log into The Crew not too long ago, and I got this message. I could not play the game. And this is not an issue on my end, this is a deliberate issue on behalf of Ubisoft. You see, The Crew is a game that relies on a central server to function. A central server that I do not have access to, and none of us do. It's a central server that operates on Ubisoft's end, and that server, as of March 31st, 2024, has been shut down, so I can't ever play The Crew again. Neither can you, and neither can anybody. Hence why I'm using someone else's footage. This is how games die. They force you into an always online arrangement and remove access to it at some point. Always online games are nothing new, and therefore the act of games dying is nothing new, but this is something that's also seeping its way into single-player games. The Crew is merely arguably the most high-profile example because over 12 million people have played it in its existence. But there are lists out there of games that have existed that you simply can't play anymore. A few of these games have affected me in the past. I used to play a game called Restaurant City, a free-to-play game, but one that you could spend real money on, and guess what? EA shut it down as well as the company that made it, Playfish. Here's another example. I'm a big fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game. It's a really fun game and probably would have been my 2023 Game of the Year had Resident Evil 4 Remake not came out. But guess what? Friday the 13th was by the same people and that game is now dead because that was an always online game that relied on a central server, and guess what? Someday Texas Chainsaw Massacre will be dead as well, with no way to even play with bots. They're even shutting down player attempts at server emulators to keep the game alive. They're maliciously attempting to prevent it from ever being played again. Ubisoft is doing this with The Crew as well, literally revoking people's licenses on Steam to prevent even the chance of fans reviving the game without their permission. Why would they do this? Why would they do any of this? Well, for two reasons. For one thing, by making the game rely on a central server, it prevents piracy, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Companies need to survive. But two, and this is the more insidious reason that I feel is probably taken into account by publishers more often, and it's that by essentially allowing themselves to shut off access to games, it means they're artificially limiting the games that you can play. If you spend, say, 1,000 hours in The Crew but didn't buy the second one, well, if they shut off access to the first game, that means to get your fix of The Crew, you have to buy the second one now. It strong-arms you into spending more money on their games. This is why I'm scared to death of games streaming, and why I was so happy to see Stadia go down the tubes, because all of those games that those people purchased on Stadia, they don't own any of those. All those games were on a server completely disconnected from player input. So you lost access to them the moment they decided to shut down the servers, and the majority of those games were single player, so they did not need to be connected to or otherwise involved with a central server. Which is why we need to push back against the practice of killing games now before it's too late. Before what Philippe Tremblay says comes true and games ownership becomes a thing of the past. Yeah, that's a high-up executive at Ubisoft basically saying that gamers need to get used to not owning their games. Denying access to playing games is tantamount to burning down a museum. It may be a small museum in the middle of nowhere, but that's still history we're losing. And it's not something that's unique to the crew. Like I said, this is something that happens often and is only becoming a more common practice, because it's unfortunately in the publisher's best interest to do this in order to maximize profit. But the thing is, game companies have been skirting on the edge of legality for a while in order to increase quarterly profits, and removing access to goods like video games is something that should be illegal. Just the idea of selling you something and then yanking away access seems like it should be illegal on its face, so why isn't it? Well, because the legality has never been tested, not until now. YouTuber Ross Scott of Accursed Farms has launched the largest games preservation campaign in history, with action attempting to be taken place in multiple countries. The idea is, if we can make a big enough stink about killing games to get it looked at or even legislated in even a single country, that could set a precedent that stops games from being killed worldwide. And to be clear, the goal here is not to force expensive reforms or even necessarily to end the concept of the always online game. I'd be fine with that, but that might be a bridge too far legally speaking. Simply, we want to put it into practice that there has to be an end-of-life plan and the ability to experience a game's content once the game's support is pulled. Whether that means patching in an offline mode, giving players access to the server data, or whatever, this is a narrowly focused effort to make games reasonably playable after support ends, which realistically wouldn't even cost that much, especially if they have a plan in place from the beginning. We want the compromises to be, quite frankly, as painless as possible in order to increase the chances of it actually being put into practice. And regardless of what a Ubisoft, EA, Activision, etc. rep might say, this is very possible. Killing games is not something that needs to happen. The primary targets are France, Germany, Australia, and Canada to a lesser extent. There are a lot of points to go over, too many to cover succinctly, so I recommend checking out Ross's video on it and visiting stopkillinggames.com for more information on how you can help the cause. Good news, simply owning the crew is enough to contribute to the cause. If you don't, watch the video and visit the website anyway, there are other ways to help. It's time to finally stop publishers from killing art. I've heard people say, oh yeah, this is something that happens to music and movies as well. But no, it's not really the same, because in one way or another, movies and music can be preserved whether the creators intend them to be or not. You know, hypothetically, if you download a movie, there's no part of that movie that isn't available to you because the entire movie is essentially just a video file. There's no external part of that video that prevents it from being viewed if you're not connected to a specific server. And the same goes for music. Video games are in a completely unique state in that they're thousands upon thousands of individual files and they need them all to work. And some of those files are incredibly complex, meaning you can't easily create your own version. You need one file to view a movie. You need one file to listen to music. But if certain files are just inaccessible to a user, video games can die in a way completely unprecedented. Then I'm sure some people will make snide comments about not caring that certain games are dying because, you know, who cares, these games suck or whatever. Well, I don't personally care what excuses you give. Even if you don't like any of the games that have already been killed, eventually you will lose access to something you like. I promise you that. So the time is now to fight back, even if you have no dog in the fight. Games have the potential to die like no other medium, and we need to stop it from taking place. Anyways, usually I end these videos by plugging my stuff, but I feel that would be a bit scummy at a time like this, so all I can say is do whatever you can to spread the word and participate in saving the future of games. Remember to watch Ross Scott's video, I'll link to that in the description, as well as a link to stopkillinggames.com. I've been the King of Snark Style right here on Tactical Bacon Productions, and I will see you next time. Stay crispy, my friends.